We are live.
Okay, Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Junaid Sheikh, and I am a volunteer in the Bay Area community. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I want to start with this ayah of Surah Isra. Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi laylam min al-masjid al-harami ila al-masjid al-aqsa alladhi barakna hawlahu linuriyahu min ayatina innahu huwas sami'ul basir. As I said that he is taking his servant Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the night from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid Al-Aqsa, alladhi barakna hawlahu, the neighborhood of which, or the surroundings of which, are blessed. Linuriyahu min ayatina innahu huwas sami'ul basir, so that he can see our signs. And this is the most important thing that actually struck me when reading this ayah, because Allah ended this ayah with Huwa Sami'ul Basir. He did not say Huwa Al-Ghafurur Rahim, Huwa Al-Latiful Khabir. He said Huwa Sami'ul Basir, because he is seeing and he is hearing and he is seeing what is happening and what has happened for the last 100 years in this blessed place of his. We know that whatever is happening, we already were overwhelmed with other problems in our ummah, from Uyghur to Burma to India, Kashmir, and if you come to the east, to the more west, the Middle East, which was already embroiled in civil war and wars for the last more than a decade now. And the issue of Palestine has always been there. They had two intifadas, and people are now talking about this is third intifada coming. Well, we don't know. May Allah bring the best for all of us. But what strikes me is that the resiliency of this ummah. Even with so much trouble, we are resilient. Alhamdulillah. Why? Because we are the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he showed us the way. He had so many fronts open at the same time when in Makkah. He had so many fronts open, so many problems at the same time, and he dealt with it, and Allah provided the way out, and he will provide us the way out, inshallah. With that, we would like to welcome Dr. Hatem Bazian and Sheikh Alauddin Elbakri to our show tonight. And they are the experts in this field. Dr. Hatem Bazian is an expert. Sheikh Alauddin Bakri, we heard his adhan from Masjid Al-Aqsa. If you haven't heard it, let us know, and we will send out a link here. We'll find a link for you, inshallah. It was a beautiful adhan. And we wanted to know what's happening right now, because people want to know what's happening, and we want to educate people about what is Shaikh Jarrah, what is this eviction about, and so on and so forth. So we want to start with Dr. Hatem Bazian. If you can give us an overview of what's happening. What is Shaikh Jarrah, first of all? Where is it located? And what's happening? What is this eviction about? So Sheikh Dr. Hatem Bazian. Dr. Hatem, you're on mute. Dr. Hatem, you're on mute. The unmute panel is on the bottom of your screen. Welcome, Sister Zahra. Okay, Dr. Hatem is going to join us again. Sheikh Ala if you can talk about, you went there very recently. Can you please let us know what where this neighborhood is basically, and what consists of Masjid Al-Aqsa and so on? What is Golden Dome? If you
Assalamu
can.
alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes, Dr. Hatem is back.
I guess either the Mossad or the FBI were beginning to censor me just as soon as I started talking. It's because we were talking and there was nothing about it. And as soon as wanted to say something, that's it. So you asked Zahra, so if Zahra wants to talk, no, so I should jump in, continue. Okay, Assalamu alaikum. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim wa salatu wa salam ala khair al-mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So you asked the question about what is Shaykh Jarrah and what is the current cycle of protest and cycle of resistance in Jerusalem. In order to answer the question of what Shaykh Jarrah, one has to look at Jerusalem with the different neighborhoods. So the area that we're speaking about is what's called East Jerusalem, which is predominantly the Muslim, and there are Christian communities within the East Jerusalem, the Arab quarter. There's another Christian quarter also in East Jerusalem. And the area of Shaykh Jarrah is really, if you want to think about the gate to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, Shaykh Jarrah is one of those critical strategic, what you call neighborhoods, that the Zionist settlers who are intent on a destruction of Al-Aqsa Mosque. So let's just be very clear. These settlers that are been supported by successive right-wing governments in Israel, they have the plan. Already the drawings are in place. On a regular weekly basis, they come into an attempt to assault the Al-Aqsa Mosque and try to put what we call a foot on the plateau up there in order to begin the construction of the third temple. So beginning with the Sharon period, when he was part of the Likud government in the mid-70s, he began to take and direct the settlers to take houses in East Jerusalem. And he began this process by literally coming and taking over a house in the middle of the Palestinian neighborhood and kicking the family out. And then the military comes in and defend him. And that's been the process from the mid-70s, an ongoing assault on the Palestinians in East Jerusalem, taking one house at a time, one plot, one area. So there are three areas now in Jerusalem that are under threat. One is Shaykh Jarrah, where we already have the Supreme Court. Again, to call it the Supreme Court is an insult to both Supreme and Court simultaneously. But this is what we're dealing with. This is a colonial court that actually gives the right of the settlers to take over houses as being equal to the indigenous inhabitants of the land. Because Israel in 1972 changed the designation of the West Bank into disputed territory. So that's been Shaykh Jarrah area. The area of Wadi al-Juz, where if you know Jerusalem, as you come from the Mount of Olives into Wadi al-Juz, that goes into the old city, and Bab al-Amud, right? The Pillars Gate is a second neighborhood that the settlers are attempting to take and evict Palestinian from those neighborhoods, and also Silwan area, which is also another section. So literally what you have is an attempt to encircle Al-Aqsa, to isolate the broader Palestinian community in the large area of Jerusalem from the entry and access to Al-Aqsa Mosque. So they're not working haphazardly. They're working in a deliberate, methodical way to take over Palestinian neighborhoods that would isolate the Al-Aqsa Mosque and begin to have a contiguous Zionist presence from the Jewish quarter all the way around encircling the old city. So that's one part of what is taking place. So the Supreme Court beginning, or not Supreme Court, but the attempted eviction of over 100 families from the area of Shaikh Jarrah began at the beginning of Ramadan. And there was a video that was circulating on YouTube, this guy Yaqub, who took over a house, and literally he stands in there, he says, well, if I don't take it, somebody else take it, so might as well being me, right? So I want people to understand what is taking place. You have these thugs, settlers, that come in the middle of the night, and they attack a house and throw the family out. In any civilized country, not to say that this is a measure, but in any modern civilized country, if thugs come to your house at 12 o'clock midnight, you call 911, right? Most will come, the police will come and ask, who lives in here? You say, that's my house. They'll take the thugs out. Not in Palestine, not in Jerusalem, not in the West Bank. The military, Israeli military comes, throws the Palestinians out, secures the settlers in the location, and they tell the Palestinians, your matter is referred to the court. Why? Because this is disputed area. Because the settler has a paper, most likely written to him by Sheldon Adelson, signed by Donald J. Trump and Kushner, that this house belongs to them. And now it's referred to the court. The Palestinian has a land deed written from the Ottoman era, also renewed during the British era, recognized by the Jordanians during their governance of the West Bank. That documentation has the same standing as the paper that fictitiously produced by the settler. In the meantime, that process takes years, and the Palestinians will be living across the street in a tent provided by the Red Cross. And every once in a while, you get the United Nations that comes to take pictures with the European delegation from the European Parliament. They'll tell you, you need to wait, and we will resolve this issue. So by the time they say, by the time you wait on the process, it's actually many years, and the settlers already have taken the house, most likely expanded to the next house and next house, and in the meantime, this is the dynamics. So what we saw in Shaikh Jarrah is an attempt to try to lay claim to almost 100 houses in there, and simultaneously, the extreme right wing was planning for this mass march, which took place yesterday. This what's called the Unification of Jerusalem March. This is on an annual basis, this march takes place to indicate that Jerusalem is a unified city, and they usually actually march intentionally in Arab, Muslim, Christian neighborhoods, especially in Bab al-Amud. This is not what you call your peaceful, we are the world, let's hold hand. These are the most extreme settlers, thugs, racists, taunting the Arabs, marching, saying death to the Arabs. This is our way, our place. We need to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque. We need to build the third temple. So that's the context of what's taking place. Interestingly enough, yesterday, as a result of the mass mobilization of the Palestinians, the government was forced to change the route of the march. So they actually could not march in the Arab neighborhood. So the mobilization of the Palestinians was after the Israeli military emptied the Al-Aqsa Mosque, people from all the villages, the towns, even though that the Israeli government and military closed the roads and freeways, Palestinians went on foot and literally repopulated the Al-Aqsa Mosque and protected it, and forced the government to actually cancel or change the route so that these thugs will not march through the Palestinian areas. I compared it yesterday. If you actually can compare how the Charlottesville protesters with the torches, the tiki-tiki torches that march in Charlottesville, this is the type of marchers that we have coming in the Palestinian neighborhoods, protected by the military, edged on by Netanyahu and his government and some of the right-wing Knesset members. And that's, in essence, what we are experiencing throughout Ramadan. Right? It completely, what you call, came to an eruption on the 27th of Ramadan, but this has been the daily onslaught on the Palestinians from the first day of Ramadan, preventing people to come to have access. And actually, there was a beautiful event that took place on also the 27th, that the Israelis military prevented Palestinians from 48 who were coming with buses to come to Al-Aqsa Mosque to pray in what's called Jum'ah al-Hazina, the last Friday of the month. So they blocked the roads. They forced people off the buses, say, you're not going to be going to Al-Aqsa. Palestinians from Jerusalem and the surrounding area saw what took place. They blocked the other side of the freeway, which takes people to Tel Aviv, which actually brought the whole city and the whole region into what you call a standstill. And then Palestinians in Jerusalem and the other side came with their cars and began to pick people who were unloaded from the buses and drive them to pray in Al-Aqsa Mosque. So this was a major victory that was registered by the Palestinians, which people who say why Palestinians don't have what you call peaceful protests. Well, maybe because you're not looking, and maybe you're getting news from NRA and the Israeli consulate, and therefore you always pose what I consider to be the stupidest, dumbest questions, saying why Palestinians are not peaceful, because you only what you call look at CNN, Fox, and the rest of them, and the first question is like, oh, violence came back to the Holy Land, as violence was on vacation in Mexico with Ted Cruz in Cancun, and all of a sudden, just on the 27th, violence came back to the Holy Land, right? So this, again, we need to understand how the framing take place. The Palestinians are subject to violence on a daily basis, almost on a weekly basis. 1 or 2 Palestinians are shot or killed inside the territories. It's only when an Israeli gets injured, now it becomes violence returned to the Holy Land. So which means that Palestinians are not human. We don't actually mourn them. We don't recognize their injury, which is similar to what we see in relations to blacks in relations to the United States. So again, you could draw the similarities. So this is my what you call foray to your question. So let's get some of our other panelists to.
That was very good. Yeah, good background so that we set the stage. We have a context. We know what we're talking about. Sheikh Ala, you had talked about the masjid complex around, or the Aqsa Mosque is actually not one mosque. I mean, there are multiple mosques in that complex and so on. Can you tell us a little bit about what Masjid Al-Aqsa is, what is the Golden Dome, and so on?
Jazakallah khair. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So we always look at a rectangular shape, piece of land, and surrounded by a wall, and in the middle of it there is the Golden Dome, which we refer to as the Dome of the Rock. People think that is Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. That is part of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. So when you say Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, you're talking about the entire rectangular shape on the mountain. And as a matter of fact, if we were to remove that which was built over hundreds and hundreds of years, it's like a mount, literally like this. But then to make a mountain a flat, so you have to build it to make it kind of a flat piece of land. So on that piece of land, there is probably, from what I remember, 7 internal mosques, small, big. The mosque of Al-Buraq, the mosque of Al-Rahma, the mosque in the corner, the mosque, Al-Marwani mosque under the ground. So you can count so many buildings. But for example, if you look back 10, 15, 20 years, actually before 2000, 2001, when Eid hits, or when Salat al-Jum'ah used to hit, before preventing Palestinians from praying there, the entire place is full of people. Like you would have 1.5 million people praying there. At the lowest, you're talking about 500,000 people praying in every open space and closed space. So that this plot of land is surrounded by, especially from one side, from one side there is like graveyards and a valley. From the other side there are buildings. These buildings control the gates. These are very old buildings. They control the gates to Al-Aqsa Mosque. These gates are mostly where the Palestinian lives, except in one corner. That's where it's called the Jewish quarter. It used to be called the Moroccans neighborhood. That neighborhood was removed a long time ago. We're talking about 1967, and that became the open space and the Wailing Wall and that area. The rest of the areas, you're talking about markets that leads to gates that leads to that plot of land. And walking through these markets, walking through these buildings is one of the most joyful, like awe-inspiring, unbelievable experiences you can have in your life. Every stone in that structure can tell you a story. For example, let me share with you something I never knew until I saw it. One neighborhood that leads to one door is actually called the African neighborhood. So when you go there, there are Muslims from 7 countries, like you're talking about Chad, Senegal, Sudan, these are 7. And the people who live around that gate and that entire neighborhood, they literally are black Palestinians. They speak the dialect like me. Their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents have come to Palestine in the form of pilgrims. So the old style, you would go to Hajj. What do you do when you go to Hajj? You do Hajj. Then you visit Medina. Then you visit Masjid Al-Aqsa. And then you visit the city of Hebron, Al-Khalil. So some people, when they used to stop by Masjid Al-Aqsa, they used to fall in love. It's a city that makes you fall in love with it. Then they settle. They wouldn't go anywhere. So believe it or not, we have the neighborhood of the Indians. When we say Indians, before 1948, that means India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, the entire Nepal, anything that came from that Indian subcontinent. Literally, up to recently, I actually know a person that speaks Palestinian dialect like me, but still have an Indian passport from the Indian embassy. So you have these international Muslim neighborhoods that live around Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa in these old homes, very, very captivating, because you're walking in this narrow road, and then there is like this door. When you enter the door, there is a house, which is neighbor to the next house, to the next house, to the next house. It's like a web, right? So you can tell that, over the years you're walking, Palestinian, and then there's one settler like in the middle, and then Palestinian, and then there's one settler in the middle. And you can see like there's no homogeny, like something is wrong with the picture when you're walking there. And then all of that, all of these gates, all of these neighborhoods lead you to the compound, the ground, the plot of land that we call Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. There are markets, Palestinian markets, very captivating, spices, restaurants, clothing, gold, silver, antiques, furniture, and it's all the life of the Palestinian economy in Jerusalem. So this is very important because the Palestinian economy depends on the religious tourism, that come people for this, and you would see, and the Palestinians, it extends these neighborhoods. There are Palestinian Muslim neighborhoods, then there is Christian neighborhoods, very, very close. I mean, talking about attached to the wall of that compound. And you will see like Muslims and Christians who have been neighbors there for 1,000 years or more. So, and you see the dynamics, and you see there's something not natural. Like you're walking, then you come to enter Masjid Al-Aqsa, then suddenly there's a lot of soldiers. So you go from markets, restaurants, falafel, shawarma, spices, then suddenly there is soldiers. Then you have to enter Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa checkpoint. You always ask, like, why a checkpoint around a religious house of worship? This should be like a very spiritual place. You don't want to see something like that before you enter a masjid, see an AK-47 and things like that. Anyway, but that's in answer to your question, just to make people more familiar if I succeeded in doing that.
No, thank you, Sheikh. You did actually. We got a good idea of what it is. Sister Zahra, you visited the place, I think last year or the year before, I forgot. So I'm sure you can relate to it when you see these live videos of the sound bombs and smoke and people running around, then soldiers chasing them. How do you feel about it?
So, Assalamu alaikum, Brother Junaid, Sheikh Hada, Dr. Hatem, and Jazakallah khair to Bay Muslim Media and American Muslims for Palestine for all the work that you've been doing always on these issues. I think I visited it must have been 2018. And we, as Americans, had the privilege to access the Al-Aqsa compound every day, which I think I realized for the first time that summer that local Palestinians could not. Like, it was something that I took for granted when I once told a Palestinian friend, so-and-so wants to meet you. Do you want to come to the masjid? And she was like, my family can't just come to the masjid the way the American tourists do. And so from the moment that, we learned that and we started to visit on a regular basis during that trip, which actually I took with American Muslims for Palestine, it's a really heavy feeling. I'd actually also had the opportunity to go on Umrah that year. And so I'd been to Mecca and Medina and then Jerusalem, and to see like this holy site so militarized. And that's not to make light, by the way, of the crimes of the Saudi regime, but to see this site so militarized, to see Palestinians and anyone that looks Palestinian, anyone that doesn't have the privilege of the blue American passport and their ability to access that space was something that weighed on us heavily, and we didn't take for granted. It also weighed on us that, on many occasions, as compared to Mecca and Medina, this compound was empty because the locals couldn't access it. And so we went every day to honor it, to make sure that we were, praying in the space and at the request of Palestinians, really bringing life to the space, or life and light to the space. We were there at Jummah, and I think what I experienced is a fraction of what Palestinians experienced. But I remember the women were praying, and all of a sudden, bang, bang, loud sounds. Is it gunshots? What's happening? There were explosions outside. And so a minor version of what we are seeing right now, but some settlers had tried to come on to the property. They'd, of course, been accompanied by soldiers who attacked people who were praying. And so the women had to lock down. We didn't know where the men in our group were. We had to wait. That fear and panic, I think, is something that a lot of Americans, particularly Americans, by the way, in Silicon Valley, who are tuned into this, may take for granted, never having experienced. To hear gunshots, to hear the grenades, to know that it's not, one of the conversations we're having right now, broadly in a communications realm, is it's not a conflict. It is one side that is the oppressor, one side that is militarized, one side that is violent, going after people who are literally praying, and you're paralyzed, right? Like, you don't know what else to do. After it took some time, and we just hunkered down and we prayed. We prayed for safety. We prayed for the safety of the brothers in our group because they were outside. And when we did finally come together and find each other, there was an air of relief, but also an understanding that, like, we're going to go back to the United States. This is daily life for these people, not just in the masjid, but also people in these neighborhoods, right? People in these long-standing refugee camps, people walking down the street. And the resilience of the Palestinian people, I think, is something that amazes me. The fact that people welcomed us into their restaurants to have kunafa just hours after that. And when the apartheid Israeli officers and soldiers tried to lock up the compound afterwards to say, well, there was they would call it a conflict, but, a skirmish, a scuffle, whatever, we have to, like, block everyone from entering. So people start to pray at the gates. They start to pray in the streets until the pressure to reopen mounts. And so I think that's something that I'm holding really dear right now, is that for as many of us that this feels really heavy for, we should take inspiration from, Palestinian resilience, Palestinian joy, and the fact that this is so important to them, and they are sacrificing so much, when in fact we are not sacrificing very much at all by comparison.
Oh, that's true. We are, in the comforts of our home, praying in the masjid, doing our regular lives, jobs and families and so on. So, I mean, they are on the front for sure. That's there's no comparison. Dr. Hatem, Sister Zahra mentioned that the locals, they cannot visit Masjid Al-Aqsa. What is that for? I mean, can nobody visit it? Can none of the locals go, or is there like a limit, like, a quota system? Only these many people allowed every day, first come, first serve, rest of them return back?
West Bank population, which is the population outside of Jerusalem, because Jerusalem population, they carry Israeli ID cards that they are residents of Jerusalem. They're not citizens of Israel, they're residents. So they carry ID cards, which allow them some access. It's not absolute access, because again, as Sheikh Ala mentioned, that you have these checkpoints. So sometimes randomly that you will have those from age 16 to 40 can't access the mosque, even from Jerusalem. Those outside of Jerusalem, those who live in Ramallah, Tul Karim, Jenin, Deir Dibwan, Al-Bire, Nablus, Al-Khalil, all these populations are prohibited, right, to visit Jerusalem, to visit Al-Aqsa Mosque. They have to go through a procedure, a process where you get a permit, and sometimes you have to apply for it, and it takes some time. Except for older men and women, they might be given access, and it depends on who's manning or womaning the checkpoints in general. So Palestinians might you might have a Palestinian who was born, grew up in the West Bank, maybe about 15 miles away from the mosque. They actually might be able to see the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock from their neighborhood in the West Bank. They might actually see it, look, and they see the dome, the captivating picture that people put it, but they have not been able, since they're born in the mid-70s, early years, they have not been able to actually visit Al-Aqsa Mosque. Not only the Muslims, which is something also we need to know, Christian Palestinians in the West Bank can go and visit the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is the most sacred site for Christians in Jerusalem. So likewise, they're subject to limitation, which gets me to the issue when I said about the buses coming from Palestinians who live in 48. Palestinians in 48, which those who carry Israeli citizenship, they have taken it upon themselves to actually what we call Ihya Masjid Al-Aqsa and protecting it, meaning enlivening Al-Aqsa Mosque. So they actually, on a rotation basis, every week they bring in buses from all of the 48 area on turns in order to pray and to stay guard in Al-Aqsa Mosque. So the settlers and these temple, not worshippers, but those who want to reconstruct the temple, because every week they attempt to mount an assault with the attempt to actually lay the foundational stone on Al-Aqsa compound. And once you get what you call a stone in there, then they will begin to go through the procedure of trying to establish the third temple. Last point to make on this. Palestinians in Jerusalem as well don't have unfettered access to Al-Aqsa Mosque. There is a time that they actually access and they have to leave. This is directly as a result of Israeli manipulation of the regulations in Al-Aqsa Mosque in order to follow the same pattern that they use with the Ibrahimi Mosque in Al-Khalil. The Ibrahimi Mosque, where the Prophet Abraham is buried, they began by instituting time regulations, where when you are able to access the mosque and when you can't. And then through the years after the Baruch Goldstein shot 49 Palestinians during the Ramadan, actually they claimed half of the mosque, and now the mosque is actually, for sometimes the whole days will be locked up, that Palestinians don't have access to it in Al-Khalil, right? So the same type of procedure and strategy is being pursued in Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the fact that the Palestinians continue to mount a resistance on a weekly basis. So today we just seen it because it actually is far more what you call violent in relations to what the Israelis have done, coming and beating people up while they're praying, while they're doing i'tikaf. But on a weekly basis, almost every Friday, you have a same attempted assault by the settlers to lay the foundational stone on Al-Aqsa Mosque. And the same thing, the Palestinians actually resist and make it impossible for them to do so.
Wow, it's pretty distressing and pretty sorrowful, remorseful to hear that the Palestinians face this on every Friday on a weekly basis. It's just that we heard it got amplified this time, but it doesn't get amplified, every week. Wow, this you said.
I might add, underneath the mosque, they already have tunneled under from one side all the way across. So underneath the mosque, the physical building, literally almost 7-story deep, they have constructed a temple, a synagogue underneath Al-Aqsa Mosque. And there's a tunnel that goes from one edge, which is where the Wailing Wall is, which is right now they call it it's actually the Ha'it al-Buraq, they call it the Wailing Wall, all the way to the other section of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and it's actually weakened the foundation of the mosque relative to this building and excavating underneath Al-Aqsa Mosque. In violation, again, in violation of international law. We tend to appeal to international law more often than anybody in the world. We have 2 or 3-story level of what you call paperwork in the UN, like reserved for Palestine. Like, that's just something. It's violation of international law. It becomes the second sentence we usually use.
And the settlers are allowed in that tunnel to go and pass through?
Not only settlers, but you have your American settlers supporting community, the Sheldon Adelson, the Haim Saban, or the what you call your Kushners. All these people, they come in and they go down and tour and they host parties down there and so on. It's basically, this is ours. Which reminds me, when people were when Clinton was attempting to negotiate the peace process between the Palestinians and the Israelis, he insidiously took the Israelis' position. He says, well, whatever is above the ground belongs to the Palestinians. Whatever is below the ground belongs to Israel. So the question is that, so if the above the ground collapses, who owns the property, right? Which in essence, what we're essentially claim the land, because whoever claims the land claims whatever on top of it. But if you split it in that way, you begin to actually see how insidious Clinton's proposal, supposedly peace proposal, but it's a misspelling of the word, but we'll leave it at that in relation to what Clinton was offering the Palestinians.
And you also said that the residents of Jerusalem have a residency card. They don't have a passport, an Israeli passport, or nothing of that sort.
They don't. They usually take Jordanian passports to travel out.
Wow.
And then there's a whole
and they've been living there for decades.
Well, again, if you take the Nusaybe family, the Dajani family, the Khalidi family originated from the Khalid bin Walid. They're descendants from Khalid bin Walid. They're some of the oldest families in there. If you go to Al-Khalil, right, the oldest Palestinian families is the Tamim family, Tamim bin Aus al-Dari, companion of the Prophet. They're actually from Bani Lacham, 3,000 plus years history, and they still run the oldest waqf in the history of not only Palestine, but the history of the Muslim world, because the Prophet ﷺ designated for them the waqf. And Ali ibn Abi Talib wrote the document. Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman, and Abdul Rahman bin Auf were the witnesses to the waqf that was written and is still in existence in the Khalil today. Right? So to talk about that, people, one woman that was being evicted from Shaikh Jarrah neighborhood, she's older than the state of Israel. The woman that's being evicted from her house, her age, not the house. We don't want to, I say my grandfather store in the old city of Nablus, right, is older than the U.S. history. So that's why when we study U.S. history, it's what you call current affairs. But the store is 700 years old. You're talking about history that is generations and generations ongoing.
Sheikh Allah, you said that, when you're going in the market, you said there are houses, and then like after every few houses, there is a house of a settler, or how did that happen? It's in a Muslim area. You're talking, right? This is like a Arab neighborhood, and then so how did this happen?
So this is what we call, what is worse than death? Slow death. That's what's worse than death. So what is happening is slowly but surely, right now we are all waking up to, because they're trying to evict 100 families. But what has been happening systematically on weekly, monthly, yearly basis is that one family at a time. One family. So you and I don't hear about it. That's why that happened, that you will have like one settler in the middle of a Palestinian neighborhood. Now they're going for wholesale. They're no more doing retail. They're doing wholesale of removing people. So this is, this is becoming an international issue. And there's something also that I wanted to say, that people like, what in the world is the relationship between removing families from the neighborhood around the Masjid Al-Aqsa and between what's happening inside the Masjid Al-Aqsa, like attacking worshippers? It's a very simple equation. When you have an extreme, far right-wing extreme government, they like, the violence, and they want this to happen. So what happens is, basically, if they wanted to evict these Palestinian families from their homes in these neighborhoods, Shaykh Jarrah, Wadi al-Jawz, and Silwan. Now the Palestinians kind of erupted and said no, and tried to defend these houses. So every time the Palestinian says no, then you have to punish them. How do you punish them? You go to Masjid Al-Aqsa and you attack the worshippers. Has nothing to do with what's happening. Why do you do that? So that then everybody screams and everybody gets up, and then the news will no more become about 100 families are about to be evicted. The news becomes, oh, there are clashes. Oh, there is conflict. Oh, there's... So you actually lose sight. Right now, if you just watch the news, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. First day, eviction, Shaykh Jarrah. Second day, clashes. Third day, no more. We're not talking about Shaykh Jarrah. Now we're talking about, oh, there is clashes and this and that, and there is an full war. So it's just like almost childish. Like if you hurt me, I'm gonna go and punch your father in the face, or punch your mom in the face, like so that I make the whole family erupt. You see, if you take a knife and poke someone, they have to say, you cannot poke someone with a knife and then tell them you cannot say anything and react. So the knife in the heart of the Palestinians, in the heart of every Muslim, is Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. So you have a problem somewhere, it doesn't work, then you go and do a problem somewhere else, so that then the news gets mixed and the original issue gets in the background. A technique that has been used again and again and again, and then it becomes clashes and this and that, and it's very sad. What I'm saying is that after humanity went through colonialism, and after we went through all of this, there became a level of maturity. Like an average person has a level of maturity around the world. What is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad, what is this and that. After wiping out the population of 3 continents, this is what I say, the world got out of the Enlightenment and the Renaissance. The Renaissance was good for Europe, but it wasn't good for the rest of the world, because we wiped out the population of North America, South America, and Australia. So after we did that, we woke up and said, oh my God, this was bad. We shouldn't have done that. We have now consciousness, which is good that humanity is waking up. Now, it's almost the whole world has to reverse psychology and go back into, no. Colonialism is good. No. Racism is good. We're actually having to go backward so that we can, that's the only way you can accept the situation right now. So it's very sad, and that's why every human with a good conscience should be protesting and making his voice and her voice heard, right? And from every walk of life. And that's why we see, so many Jewish people are, speaking up against this. And because, we as humanity have developed, and now we can see the ugly history that has happened. And we don't want to repeat that ugly history. We can do better. We can definitely do better than this instead of going back into that psychology. Yeah.
You said very truly that they, not just them, but the whole West dissipates, kind of dilutes the message, right? The media dilutes the message when it comes out. So now talking about the media and talking about the West, we live in a country which is very influential. We provide billions of dollars of aid every year to the Middle East, Israel, and so on. What is our duty? What, Sister Zahra? What do you think? What is our duty in living here, having so much power? This country has power. That means we have power. What do we do with it? How do we utilize it, and how do we influence so that we can make an impact, make a change? I mean, we need to have, like we said, we are enjoying our lives, right? We don't even feel it. We are at ease. How do you revive ourselves and make ourselves influencers and make change in this?
I remember, Brother Junaid, in one of the refugee camps we visited, we met with families where, every male in the family had either been intentionally injured by an Israeli soldier, had been arrested by the Israeli military, and or had been killed, right? And so it was like they were intentionally targeting able-bodied men in the family, and families were continuing to thrive despite that. I also remember there was, and Dr. Hatem or Sheikh Alauddin would know, but in one of the refugee camps we visited, at the entryway, they have, the names of all of the children that have been killed in a mural. And over it, someone drew US missiles as almost a reminder to American visitors that, like, this isn't, Israel isn't doing this on its own. Like, the US government props this up. It's not just that we influence the process, it's that we send the most military aid in the world to apartheid Israel. If we took a fraction of that money, we could have had clean water in Flint. We could have had better funded schools. Like, there are so many things that could be done with that money, but we prop up that entire apartheid state. And so it's not even just that we have a responsibility. I would say that we're complicit. One of the things that haunts me from that visit is, we talk about civil disobedience as a means of protest. It's something we study. It's something that we celebrate as Americans. We talk about how, Martin Luther King Jr. sat in on the lunch counters and the bus boycotts. Where's our civil disobedience? Because every time I pay my taxes, right, which I do because I am afraid of going to jail. Like that's it's plain and simple. Like, find me someone who says I pay my taxes because it's fun. No, most people pay their taxes because they're afraid of going to jail. Maybe they care about the roads, maybe they care about the streets, but so much of our tax dollars go to Israeli apartheid. So I am choosing my freedom over someone else's. I am choosing my health and wellness over someone else's, and I'm choosing my life over someone else's. And so I'm not just involved or a bystander. I am paying for this. I am complicit. And so there's a lot to do, right? I think this is why it's first and foremost so important that we are involved in the civic process in the United States. It is our senators and our members of Congress who are making these decisions. Do we know their names? Are we holding them accountable? Are we engaging them on a regular basis? Seeing what young Palestinian activists in the Bay Area have done, for example, to build relationships with Congressman Ro Khanna has been so important. He's far from perfect, right? He gets this issue wrong a lot, but he's made progress on the issue. He hears from Palestinians and he hears from community members when he gets it wrong. That's important. We need to do that with all 435 members of Congress, right? We need to make sure that we're holding the Senate accountable and saying, like, you said you wanted to run on a progressive agenda. You said you wanted healthcare for all. Where's that money going to come from, right? You said you wanted to end the endless wars. That's not just about Iraq and Afghanistan. That's also about Palestine. And the trickle-down effect is long. So it's like the money that we're sending there that could be used here, the money that we're sending there that's doing harm. And by the way, the exchange of technology, the business relationships, right? For listeners who are in technology, like, what is your company's relationship with the apartheid regime? Are they supplying parts? Like, we talk a lot about how we want to boycott Sabra hummus, but are you working for a company that is making the equipment for what is happening there, right? These are questions we have to be asking. And this is also why, and they didn't ask me to say this, but I will say that this is also why American Muslims for Palestine is an organization that I so proudly support, because for so long, as American Muslims, we've been putting a Band-Aid on the problem. There's a bombing, so we send money to the hospital. A family is starving, so we send food to the family. Those are very important things. But our foreign policy in the United States, our funding decisions, and the way our media talks about this, the way our the way our campuses address these issues, all have an impact on what happens there. And groups like AMP are really working on the front lines to say we need to address the root cause and not just the symptoms, because we just keep getting caught up in the symptoms when in fact we are sitting at the root of where it all happens.
So for Dr. Hatem and Sister Zahra both, if there is one thing you would like our community to do to help in this effort, what is that?
Well, I don't want to have one thing, but a number of things, because one thing is a little bit too much. We have 30 days, so
in terms of priority, I mean, what would be the highest priority among whatever?
The highest priority, again, and speaking here to the Muslim community, I think the Muslim community should embrace the boycott, divestment, and sanction movement for sure, and seriously doing so, which means all of this, what I consider to be distorted interfaith washing that takes place, where you actually think that we're engaging with some of the main Zionist organizations locally, ADL, AJC, JCRC, Zionist Organization of America, all types of outfits that are structured to erase the Palestine issue from the conversation. So PDS movement is the civil resistance movement of the Palestinian civil society has called for it. I would say the Muslim organizations have been almost at the tail end. They're not even on the train. They don't even consider jumping on the train because it actually jeopardizes their assimilation, their integration, possibly their seats on civil society, because they think that the local Jewish communities, Zionist communities, are the gatekeepers. So I'm calling on our Muslim community to actually take the PDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement seriously, which requires, one, is that you have to check with the Palestinians first. Mm-hmm. Not because you're not smart, not because you figured it out, not because you are what you call the apple pie ice cream of civil society. No, because it's the principle when you are dealing with a community that is facing apartheid, facing settler colonialism, facing the ravages of violence, your access should not be negotiated at the expense of those who are suffering. And I would, again, if you ever find me talking to Hindutva and Hindu nationalists and to tell them how I think they are what you call can be partners for us to clean the street, you should actually kick me out from the mosque, because that would be violating our brothers and sisters that are in Kashmir, our brothers and sisters in India, our brothers and sisters that are facing the ravages of the Hindutva and the PGP party. But when it comes to thinking and relations to the local Zionists, then we set all that aside, and we're going to have what you call hummus and falafel type of relationship. So the Muslim community need to take that seriously. Second, if you are an organization and a group that has any type of investments, any type of resources, any type of endowment, you need to check your endowment that it is not actually placed in any type of companies that have any type of relationship to apartheid Israel. That's a serious aspect. Again, we speak about what you call purifying your wealth. Mm-hmm. I can't see myself thinking that we're actually gaining any part of our wealth to support our institutions from an organizations that are actually connected, or corporations and companies that are connected to an apartheid structure that oppresses the Palestinians. So I think what we need is really a very thorough examinations of our PDS companies and our investment. I no longer want any type of emotional response. Again, if you have an emotional response to Palestine, alhamdulillah, relax, have a cup of chai and sit aside. We need some sustained, qualified commitment to solidarity that is measurable, meaning we could actually trace from A to B, B to C, and we see what is tangible expressions of real. And I'm using solidarity. I don't think solidarity. It's actually we're in the same camp, because Al-Aqsa Mosque does not only belong to the Palestinians. It's where the Prophet ﷺ ascended to the heavens in the Isra and the Mi'raj. So we are entrusted with it because we are there. We have the first line of defense on it. But every Muslim have a responsibility. If you read Surah Al-Isra, you have a responsibility. If you read Surah Al-Najm, you have a responsibility. And we need to translate that responsibility into effective, actual commitment that is measurable in relations to taking the PDS movement seriously. The last I would say that I know that we want to engage with our politicians, but let me remind you, politicians are our employees. And I know we come from what you call political background back home, where the politicians own us, right? They think that we are their subjects. We are not subjects of anyone. We are subjects of Allah. In here, the public servants are literally your employees. And I am not for polite, what you call political discourse. You need to ask them difficult questions. You're paying their salaries, right? Oh, alhamdulillah, he said assalamu alaikum. I don't care whether you say assalamu alaikum or marhaba. I want you to say, what's your position on this? What's your position on settlement? What's your position on Israel, on foreign aid to Israel? What's your position on the arrest and imprisonment of children? What's your position on selling weapons to and training our police force in Israel? What's your position on Israel relationship to India and training and providing support for the Hindutva nationalists? What's your relationship and what's your position on Israel selling missile technology to China? Those are the questions. We're not just what you call, here's our check, and we're happy that he takes a picture with us and just moves on, he or she. So we need to change also how we relate to the political figures that we think they are important. Yet we're happy that they come for Eid. I don't care whether they come for Eid or not. I care how they vote. If you vote correctly, then you come for Eid correctly. If you don't vote correctly, I don't want to see you in Eid. Right? My Eid is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not going to be added because a white face came and said Salamu alaikum with a distorted Arabic. They haven't even taken Arabic 101 course. Right? So we need to change and not really continue that old type of political engagement.
Right. So just to recap, your points are, any Muslim organization, when it wants to work with any other, let's say, Jewish in terms of Israel, any Jewish organization. So first,
Zionist Jewish organization, because there's definitely some, Jewish Voice for Peace, International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network,
Right. So if they want to work with any like in an interfaith setting, make sure that they're working with the right Jewish organization. And the way to make sure is to ask people who know, right?
Sure.
So that is number one.
Sure.
Right. Number two is, you're saying as part of BDS, if you have any investment in any of these companies who are doing business with Israel, you need to take that investment out. And the third point is that when you talk to the politicians, be upfront with them. No need to be.
You don't need to be their therapist.
Yeah, exactly. And we'd be upfront with them and ask hard questions instead of just offering them iftars and so on and taking pictures. So no, that's not the point. They are serving us, and they need to serve us, and we need to make sure that they serve us in the right way. So those are the 3 points. Sister Zahra, what do you say from the political perspective? What do you think we should do?
So I would agree, obviously, with everything Dr. Hatem said, and not just because he's Palestinian, but because he's our teacher, and has, mashallah, been working on this issue for so long. I really resonated with, we're not looking for just one thing, right? The Palestinians are living under occupation daily. And so if we're asking what is our contribution, what is our responsibility is to commit to living our faith. And that has to be more than, I pray 5 times a day and I fasted for 30 days in Ramadan. It has to be that I'm standing up for justice, right? And I am doing that courageously, because when I am really pushing my comfort limits, that's when I'm demonstrating my faith in Allah. For, you know, like, oh, I gave $50. Like, okay, like where is your faith in Allah? Like, give me 5,000 and that's your faith, right? Oh,
you should
I
feel
went
the
to a
pinch.
protest, right?
You should feel the pinch.
I went to, exactly, feel the pinch. I went to a protest. You know, honestly, how most protests don't require courage these days. I confronted a politician. I engaged in civil disobedience, right? That's courage. And so what we have to be thinking about as a community isn't just what's, you know, to Dr. Hatem's point, what's the emotional response, but rather how do we sustain our work? How do we sustain our actions and treat them as worship? Like, I ask myself on a regular basis, could I stand before Allah today and say, Ya Allah, I did everything I could to stand for justice, everything possible, everything in my capacity? And I think that the answer for a lot of us, myself included, is, hey, like, I've still got to feel the pinch. I've still got to push harder. So we have to commit to doing this on a long-term basis, not just when there's a media flare-up. I agree with Dr. Hatem to say, look, we can't partner with Zionist organizations. And I want to add a layer to this. There are Muslim organizations in our community right now who partner with Zionist organizations, right? There are Muslim organizations who partner with the Jewish Federation. There are Muslim organizations who partner with JCRC and the ADL. And there are Muslims amongst us who have gone on the Muslim Leadership Initiative with like a faith-washing Zionist trip to apartheid Israel. We have to hold them accountable as a community, right? And that's me telling all of you as listeners, vote with your dollars. Say to these organizations, why are you doing this? This is not just an embarrassment to us, but it actually goes against everything we believe in. And until you change your ways, we will withdraw our support. We will stop engaging you. Because it can't be that you do one good thing one day, one minor thing, but on the other hand, you're holding up oppression, right? So this exists in our community. We have to hold them accountable. We have to say enough is enough. Like, I've been in this work more than 10 years. Some of you have been in it 20, some of you have been in it 30. Enough is enough, right? And then in addition to that, right, ask what are the things that I can do to bring other people in. So this is something that I want to, you know, add on to agreeing with everything Dr. Hatem said. But the thing we have to be asking is, okay, I knew 5 people at the protest. What does it look like to bring 10, 15, 20? Okay, I'm going to give $1,000. Can I find a couple more people to give more money? Right? Okay, I'm going to contact my elected official and hold them accountable. Can I find 5 more? And so for those of us that are in this work, right, like some of you are listening and you're new to the work. And so we're telling you, hey, what's first step? Contact your elected official, donate to the causes, pray, go to the protests. Maybe you're in this work. You've been doing it for 5, 10, 20 years. What next? Bring more people with you, right? Can you look back and say, if I left, I have now built a group, right? And I don't mean a new organization. I mean, you know, a group that's going to show up and buy a table at the fundraiser. I mean, a group that's going to say something happened, we're going to organize a protest. A group that says, we're going to go to that elected official's office. So bring more people into this work. And I'll say what I said at the protest yesterday, which is to say, I don't believe that the Palestinians need us. Their justice is with Allah, right? Their truth, their victory, all of that is with Allah, and it is predetermined. And as Muslims, we believe it will come. We need them, right? They are our salvation. They are our opportunity to say to Allah, Ya Allah, I was on the right side of history. Ya Allah, I put my faith into action. I didn't just pray and fast, but I went out and I advocated for justice. And so as we think about our work forward, they don't need us. They will win with or without us. We need them.
One thing that you want us to do right now, what is that for it to help this cause?
I have a Facebook fundraiser for American Muslims for Palestine right now. Go on and give an amount that will feel uncomfortable, right? So what will you give up tomorrow for the amount that you donated today? Because the question is, and again, they did not ask me to say this, right? But the question is, when all of this happens, who do we as a community turn to and say, okay, what should we say? What should we do? Where's the letter for the elected official? Who's organizing the protest? On this issue, mashallah, it is American Muslims for Palestine. So if you haven't gone to a protest yet, go to one. If you haven't prayed for Palestine, do that tonight, but donate to the leaders that are doing this work so that they can continue to guide us.
And if you haven't signed up, sign the letter or call your representative, call now, right now, because I know CAIR has an action alert, USCMO has an action alert. Maybe do on both the sides, because, you know, you can have multiple responses, you know, multiple, letters sent to your reps and senators. So with that, I think we are way over time. Sheikh Ali, if you want to
ask for one thing, there's a protest on Saturday in San Francisco. Is the commemoration of the Nakba, which is May 15th. It's at 12 o'clock on Valencia Street, so in San Francisco. So if you are able to make it out there, by all means. It's the anniversary of the Nakba, which is the catastrophe, the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, 750,000 expelled at the time, 8 urban centers, 531 villages demolished and erased. So if you're able to make it to San Francisco, do so.
Right. And USCMO has also announced Saturday as the day for Palestine, in solidarity with Palestine too. So I think they are also organizing protests around the country. If you are in a place where there's a protest, go for it. San Francisco has one. If there are other places you find out, go and stand up, stand by with these people. So Sheikh Allah, if you want to have any final comments, and then we'll ask you to also make dua.
Barakallah fikum. Everything that was on my mind has been said here by Dr. Hatem and Sister Zahra Billo. MashaAllah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect you, preserve you, give you the strength, and preserve your families for the courageous work that you're doing. And I do second what Sister Zahra said and what Dr. Hatem said. Sometimes I don't understand how someone stand up and start talking in the name of the entire Muslim community and make partnerships with interfaith and otherwise without actually coming and consulting, and then someone speaking in our name. So if we find something like that, we need to say, no, please, you do not speak in our name, you speak in your own name. And yes, this is the land of the free, so you go ahead and do it, but don't speak in our name. We reject that. It's an insult to each and every one of us. So alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. I think their groups are very clear about what they want to do. We have to be clear about our issues and what we want to do, and we cannot be confusing that maybe being nice will change someone's political convictions and beliefs just because you're nice to them. That's a delusion, and that never works, and that doesn't happen. And there is plenty, if one wants to work with the Jewish community, there is plenty of unbelievable Jewish organizations that stand with what is right, with the Palestinians, with justice, with equity, with. And interestingly, they are sacrificing a lot. They are under so much pressure. They have unbelievable courage, and I'm going to tell you that. But because sometimes being with them doesn't get you the cameras and you don't feel secure next to them, then nobody's interested into talking to them. But maybe you're talking to someone that you feel very secure and very like big shot, and now you're protected. Let's be reminded, our protector is Allah, no one else. Let's make it very simple. Ain't nobody protecting you on this planet except the one who created you. So let's not confuse the issues and think we're smart and political and this and that. Sometimes you need to have a principle and stick with it, because everyone is sticking to their principle. The only one who's not sticking is sometimes us. So let's stick to the principle and leave the creation to the creator. We do our part, and let's not say, oh, but if we don't do this, then nothing is going to change. No. You don't compromise your principle for the sake of reaching to your goal. That means there's no more goal because you compromise the principle, right? So this is just in general something. Buying olive oil from the Palestinian places, from the Palestinian farmers. This is their bloodline, and even that, they've been trying to take the olive trees from their roots. Buying products from made in Palestine, made in the West Bank, made in this. This is something small. When you go and do shopping, you can do that. So these are small things that I'm trying to remember what you can do, inshallah. And alhamdulillah, we have professional organizations that deal with the issues. As Sister Zahra said, you have American Muslims for Palestine. They're specialized in this. There is a Center for Studying Islamophobia led by Dr. Hatem Bazian. They are the leadership on this. Let's not imagine that we just know everything. There are studies, statistics, everything is built. Islamophobia in India, Islamophobia in France, Islamophobia. You can't just sit down and make up this stuff. You have to have a profound study. And alhamdulillah, for every matter and problem right now, alhamdulillah, our Muslim community is maturing. We have an organization that is leading the effort. Let's support these organizations. Let's consult with them. Let's work with them instead of reinventing the wheel and imagining that we're going to do what no one else did before because we're just going to win the hearts of the people with smiles and hugs and iftars. It's not going to happen like that. There's a way to change things. We live in America, and there is a way in America, even in America, how you change the course. You don't change it with smiles and hugs and stuff like that. We always have to smile because it's the sunnah, and we always feed because it's the sunnah, but that has nothing to do with our political and what we're trying to change political issues by just smiles and hugs and iftars. That's all what I'm trying to say. Let's not confuse the two issues. Barakallah fikum. And if you want me to make dua, I'll make dua, inshallah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there is a phone number that people can actually call, and that will connect to their representative. That number for people who are interested, and actually everybody should, is 202-225-3121. If we can show that on the screen, we are trying to, but if you don't, the number is 202-225-3121. Shaykh Allah, inshallah, you can proceed with the dua.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Ya Allah, we ask you to protect our brothers and sisters in Palestine, Ya Rabb al-Alameen. Ya Allah, protect those who are helpless and those who have no power. Their only power is you, Ya Allah. We ask you that you will be there for them in every possible way, Ya Rabb al-Alameen. Ya Allah, bring fairness, justice, equity, economy, security for our brothers and sisters who have been going through this tragedy and this catastrophe for over 60 years, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, help them and give them the patience, reward them in this world, reward them in the hereafter, Ya Allah, and help us to support them and show us the way how we can support them in a very effective way, Ya Rabb al-Alameen. Ya Allah, you are our hope. In you we put our trust. We believe that there will be an ultimate justice. We believe, Ya Allah, there is a day of judgment in which not only if a human oppressed another human, he will be punished, even if an animal oppressed another animal, they will be punished. Ya Allah, we believe in your ultimate justice. But Ya Allah, we ask you, like you taught us, to pray to you and to do everything in our power to bring justice and equity and fairness to our brothers and sisters in Palestine, or anywhere where there is a minority that is unfairly treated and unjustly oppressed. Ya Allah, help us to be carriers of the banners of justice, mercy, compassion, enlightenment, the truth, and helping everyone. Ya Allah, help us to fulfill our purpose of creation by being your agents on this earth, to serve your creation, to protect the planet and the insects and everything you created, Ya Allah, and to protect the human beings that you created, the world for them, Ya Rabb al-Alameen. Ya Allah, we thank you in this beautiful last night of Ramadan. We thank you for the gift of Ramadan, for the gift of keeping us alive. We ask you to elevate the pain and suffering of all poor people, minorities, poor people, and disadvantaged people around the world who suffered from this COVID economical crush. Ya Allah, help them and help us. And we ask you to remove this pandemic from us, Ya Allah, and to guide us to learn the lessons from this pandemic and move forward to become a better humanity and a better people and a better Muslims, Ya Rabb al-Alameen. Ya Allah, we make dua for everyone that is in a miserable situation, a mother with children, a child, an orphan, an old person who don't have food or care or education or medical care. Ya Allah, we ask you to be there for them and heal them and support them يا رب العالمين يا أكرم الأكرمين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Thank you, Dr. Hatem, Sister Zahra, and Sheikh Ala for taking time and educating us about what's happening there. Thank you very much, and thank you all who are viewing and who will view, inshallah, later on. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.